Well, thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Joanna Gibbs. I'm the director of a company called Sensational Tutors. Tanya, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Tanya Slessor. I have worked in local authorities. I've been a parent advocate and I'm a parent myself to an autistic adult who's 29 now.
Which is brilliant. So we're coming here together this evening to go through how to navigate EOTAS. Well, EOTAS, however you want to say it. Everybody seems to say it a little bit differently, but in terms of the process of getting it, it's going to be similar for every local authority. The packages are challenging to get, and knowing the process, of course, is incredibly important. And this is why Tanya, as being part of the local authority, is going to be is going to deliver a lot of insight in terms of how you can be successful in getting the package. I'd first of all like to share a couple of case studies with you before we talk about what EOTAS is and the process, because EOTAS is essentially a package which makes things possible for your child. Obviously, we work with a lot of young people who have unfortunately been traumatized by the system, but there is an option for them, and EOTAS can be a really successful option. So I'm going to hopefully, if this works, share screen. Share entire window. Let me know if it doesn't work. And I believe it's going to take a minute to become a bit clear. So I'm going to share this quickly with you. There are the benefits here mentioned of EOTAS, and essentially, as we've said, it is to support those young people who have normally been traumatized by the system. I'm a qualified teacher myself. I've obviously developed a company, Sensational Tutors, because I really felt that children should be supported in an environment that creates a caring environment for children. There are a lot of benefits of EOTAS, and the personalised support is just one. So these are case studies from individual tutors. This was Curtis, diagnosis of both ASD and ADHD. Every young person, as we know, is different, and this will go through exactly what his timetable has. I will go through a couple of other options as well, but you will see how different it is. And the brilliant thing about EOTAS packages is the timetable is established by all the professionals coming together, and that's going to be really important. Essentially, it is a package, and it's so much about getting the right people in place for your young person or for your child. This was a lot of focus around the behaviour side of things. It's mentioning he's more regulated, he's more focused, and of course, a lot of local authorities do want young people to access the education system in terms of a mainstream school. So in some cases, that is going to be the focus. Case study number 2, a boy who's 11, who was supported by our amazing tutor called Philip. Again, a diagnosis of autism and ADHD. He did have extreme anxiety and severe mental health difficulties. So this is his timetable. He was obviously, he was incredibly intelligent and incredibly capable as well. So he did have debating skills as part of his support package. But you'll be able to hopefully see how different they can be and how different EOTAS packages should be as well. And he transitioned back into the school environment. So going back to the PowerPoint, which I will share for, that's what I want, yeah. Tanya to go through. So Tanya, what is an EOTAS package after all of that?
So like you said, education other than at school or education other than in school. So EOTAS and EOTIS is a tailored educational provision for children and young people with an EHCP, where it's inappropriate for them to attend a mainstream or special school or a setting. A setting can be like a college. And with that, it's something that you would have to apply for. So sometimes there's a little bit of confusion as to what EOTAS is, and then there's elective home education. So elective home education is a decision that parents make, so that they might choose that they want to take their child out of school deregister them, sometimes it's called. And the LA doesn't have to provide any education or anything that's outlined in an EHCP. So in the EHC plan, you will see that nothing is named in section I. Then we've also got section 19. So section 19 of the Education Act, that is when alternative arrangements are made. So it could be that a child is not able to attend school for medical reasons. They might not be able to attend school because they've just been excluded, or they might have an illness or hospital admission, and that's called section 19. So it is different again from EOTAS. And it's when a child or a young person is still on roll at a school. So the whole purpose of it is that an individual tuition package or alternative education will be put in place, but then they'll look at reintegrating them back into an education setting. So there will still be a school named in section I. Go on.
I was going to say, just for the audience, how difficult is it for these parents to get a package in the first place?
What, an EOTAS package?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole process that needs to be followed, and we can go through that in some of those slides as well. It's about sort of recognising that what is inappropriate education. So local authorities would send out consultations to schools. Schools tend to come back saying that they can't meet needs. Local authorities will then have further conversations with those schools to have a better understanding of why they can't meet the needs of a child or a young person.
Fabulous. Because from the conversations I had with parents, it's not an easy option either. You know, the parents I spoke to even recently, yesterday, I spoke to a number of parents about packages in reference to the Send White Paper, and it's not easy. You know, it's not the choice. Parents do want children to attend school in the hope, obviously, that a school is going to be a safe environment for them. It's not always going to be the best place. It's just being mindful that EOTAS, yes, it's a fantastic option, but it's not easy either.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, most local authorities and professionals would like children and young people to be educated within that school setting. However, like you just sort of said, is that there are reasons why a child or a young person might not be able to attend. So mental health difficulties, high anxiety, medical needs, and like you said earlier, you know, trauma from past school experiences. And sometimes there is risks of breakdowns of placements as well. So there's a variety of things where EOTAS would be appropriate.
Yeah,
And that
absolutely.
is under section 61 of the Children's and Families Act. There we go,
Fabulous.
slide up. So yeah, so it's provided through that legal framework of section 61 of the Children's and Families Act. So a local authority in England may arrange for any special educational provision that is decided is necessary for a child or a young person for whom it's responsible to be made otherwise than in school or post-16 institution. An authority may do so only if satisfied that it would be inappropriate for the provision to be made in a school or post-16 institution or at such a place. So sometimes people think that EOTAS stops at the age of 16, but it can continue with an EHCP up to the age of 25. It would be reviewed on that regular basis as well. And if a request for an EOTAS is going to be made with the decision from parents or from a local authority. So I suppose that's a bit of a myth, really. Sometimes local authorities make the decision that an EOTAS package is appropriate. I mean, ideally, only a small number in local authorities are on EOTAS packages. But, you know, I've created a few over my time thinking that, you know, it's the most appropriate way of moving forward. And I've worked with those families in regards to that as well.
Yeah,
But the other
absolutely.
thing as well is that an EOTAS package is something that is funded by the local authority. So when I sort of mentioned about elective home education earlier, that is something that the local authority would not have any oversight of, because it would be a choice of the parents to electively home educate. So it would be their decision, and it would be for them to be implementing that level of support as well.
Can actually, on that point, it's not on the slides, but if there is a family who chooses to home educate, how easy is it for that family to therefore, normally because of school-based trauma, and you know that is the option the parent wants to take, that taking the child out of school is going to be a better option there and then. How easy is it to therefore get EOTAS or EHCP after the choice of elective home education?
So it's the same route as what would happen if we were to go through if they were still in a setting. So it is no different. So you can request that at an EHC needs assessment or an annual review. So you can call that early review, and it would be the same process.
Fabulous. So it's not a case of that if you choose to home educate, that's it, you've made the decision, you're going to pay, you know, for a private tutor or for the provision, and you're not going to get the support of the local authority. There is still a pathway to get
Yeah,
funding to the
yeah.
package.
There is still a pathway to go into EOTAS. And like I say, the local authority still has to go through that whole process of sending out those consultations. So if you've chosen to electively home educate, and a school says, we think that we can meet need, then you will meet that section 61.
Yeah, fabulous.
So it's
Okay.
about having that professional evidence and things like that beforehand.
Evidence is so important.
Yeah.
So why might it be required? And we've touched on some of these things already.
So, I mean, there's lots of different reasons on why it would be required. So, as I sort of mentioned earlier, so medical needs, mental health and anxiety, trauma from school experience, and the risk of a breakdown of the placement as well. So, there's lots of different reasons.
And even reading through the list, essentially, I was speaking to a parent yesterday, and we both agreed that EOTAS just shouldn't exist. It shouldn't be a thing, and it's just so sad that it does exist, and that's because of, unfortunately, the state of the education system. But you know, if every child did feel safe in the school environment, then it doesn't need to exist. It's just really sad that we got to this point, unfortunately. But to be fair, you know, I'm glad that there is an option. I'm very nervous about what the school's white paper is saying in terms of this decision, or kind of the push for every child to attend school, which I fundamentally don't believe will and should be an option for many young people. But where we are currently, I'm glad that there is at least something for these incredible young people who deserve, you know, the very, very best specialist support, because they've been so traumatized by the system.
And
Okay.
the other thing as well is that, you know, you've got children and young people that are in a mainstream school, and the mainstream schools are taking on more children. So there could be like difficulties accessing those classrooms, because of sensory needs. The class sizes have got bigger, you know, from when my children were little, and when I was an inclusion manager in a secondary school, you know, the class sizes were about 24. And now, you know, they're increasing to 30. And also we've got the variety of needs as well. So that does impact on children and young people being able to go into the mainstream school. But we've also got secondary special schools as well. You know, the criteria for special schools is very different. And you know, it's not one size fits all, and sometimes it's helpful to have that small nurturing space as well, where they can sort of build up their confidence and their self-esteem into, and their passion and enjoyment into learning again. And there is those alternative routes as well, isn't there?
Which is incredibly important. Yeah.
That's
So you
it. And
mentioned,
EOTAS is that route.
yeah, absolutely, and that transition back. The use of the word inappropriate is used widely when it comes to EOTAS packages, and I think therefore a definition of it is going to be really helpful. If you wouldn't mind to go through that.
So the Children's and Family Act doesn't define inappropriate. However, there was some case law, and I've sort of mentioned it there, and when the slides go round that people can look at that. So case law you can find on the IPSI website, you can find on the tribunal's website as well. So it's about sort of looking at the provision and the education in school, and that how it would be unsuitable or would not be proper, having a regard to all the circumstances of the individual case. Like I sort of mentioned, it could be a case of a child or a young person is in a setting and they're not coping very well. They're becoming really dysregulated in their lessons. And the school has got to the point where they're not able to meet needs. And schools follow that graduated approach. They'll reach out to external professionals. But sometimes, it's just not working. Sometimes I do see that local authorities sort of mention that, it's not their policy to action EOTAS, but it's about parents, carers sort of identifying that and providing that additional evidence as to why EOTAS would be more appropriate. And we'll talk about that in a little while in some of the other slides as well.
Fab. You mentioned, or you referred to schools saying they can't meet needs. Now, we work with lots of families, obviously, and there are families out there who know that the schools can't meet needs, but the schools themselves are not able to admit it. Do you have any advice around that as to how to convince, let's say, the schools to say, sorry, we can't meet need? Because it's at that point we can move forward for this incredible young person.
I mean, all mainstream schools should provide that inclusive education. And when I'm talking about can they meet need, it's what's outlined in the EHC plan. So that's why it's really important to have that supporting evidence as to what their needs are and why they wouldn't be able to access their education. So, for example, therapist reports, CAMS reports, social care reports, you can obtain those other reports from those professionals around. And it's about having that in the plan, and whether or not the school would be able to meet needs that way. I mean, for
Yeah,
example, there
absolutely.
could be times where a child or young person becomes really dysregulated, or you might find that they've got an increase in exclusions. How can that be good for a young person, being excluded on multiple occasions? So, even if schools are saying we can still meet need, the evidence is there that they can't meet need because they're being excluded, or
Yeah,
that they're not attending the setting. They're not attending the setting because they become dysregulated, or,
yeah.
we see it quite a lot with young people that get high levels of anxiety, and that they can't attend. And as I sort of mentioned earlier, that would sort of come under Section 19 in some ways because it's a medical condition or a health need why they can't attend. But then we need to look at it. Is it going to be long term, short term? And again, that's when parents can request education other than at school.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And on that point, how do they do that? How can parents request EOTAS?
So you can request it through the EHCP process. So when you're going through the needs request, the assessment, or you can request it at an annual review. So like I sort of mentioned earlier, it is supposed to be a short-term solution for them to then reintegrate back into an education setting. But when I say short-term solution, every child and young person's journey is different. So, it could be something that's commissioned for 12 weeks, or it could be something that's commissioned for a year. So, it is about the needs of the child, the young person, but also the views and the wishes of the child and young person as well. And I think that's really, really important, that their views and their voices are heard throughout this whole process. I mean,
Yeah.
it is something that's outlined in the Children's and Families Act, but sometimes we see that children and young people are not attending those annual reviews. Their voices aren't heard. Um, and even if they can't attend those annual reviews, I've had children and young people that have sent a rap of how they're feeling about school. They've created a PowerPoint presentation. They've cut out pictures about how they're feeling, or they've drawn pictures. You know, it's about getting their voice heard one way or another, and that's really important. But it's also important for parents and carers for their voices to be heard as well.
Absolutely. When it comes to the longevity of the package, do local authorities consider how long they're going to need to fund the package in terms of whether they're going to approve it, or is it very much a case of actually this young person needs this support right now, you know, regardless how long it's going to take?
I mean, local authorities will look at the cost of the package in comparison to a school setting or a short-term alternative provision. Um, so costing does come into it, because obviously it comes under public expenditure,
Mhm.
and we have to pick up the public purse as well. You most probably hear quite a lot of other local authorities up and down the country where they're overspent in their budgets as well. But again, you know, that's one element of it. But then if we look at the long term of them receiving that EOTAS and what that looks
Mhm.
like, and like I just sort of mentioned, like every journey is different for a child and young person. So, for example, we might be focused on education and what are they going to get educationally. But also, another outcome could be a child or young person is not able to leave the home,
Mm.
then they've managed to leave the home. So that's another sort of journey that they've taken and an outcome that you can sort of move towards. And it's about providing that evidence
Yeah,
throughout your
and
time of being on that EOTAS package as well.
yeah, absolutely. And monitoring and outcomes obviously is incredibly important. I always default to the fact that, you know, these young people absolutely deserve the best. So if EOTAS is going to be something that really supports them as the lifeline that I considered them to be, then that certainly needs to be considered, because of the trauma they've experienced by the system. You know, how dare anybody else say they need to go back into the system, the very system that they were traumatized in the first place. It's just not fair. If anybody deserves this, it's the families as well. And I think it's also considering the impact of a parent observing their young person or their child being so traumatized by the system, is recognizing that and supporting that. And EOTAS, you know, with the special support and the wraparound support that it can create for the family, should have a really powerful impact. Um,
So when
so
so when you're if you just go back to the other slide, if
mm,
when you're requesting an EOTAS package, or when parents and carers are requesting that EOTAS package, it's really, really important that they provide that evidence. Like I sort of mentioned before, and just and earlier, expert reports, professional reports, school attainment levels, um, behavior logs. And when I say behavior logs, a majority of the time when you mention behavior, people are focusing on the negatives.
yeah.
But there are positives there as well. You know, maybe the school's got a risk assessment, an EP assessment, therapists. Like I sort of mentioned earlier about OT, for example, you know, sometimes the classroom can be overstimulating. I remember when I was in education, there was quite a lot of children and young people that were having difficulties in a certain subject. It was history. And so I looked at the patterns of behavior there, and then I identified that, you know, it was this one particular teacher that I'd worked with for like 10, 15 years. And I was thinking, oh, you know, what's happened? And what had happened is over the summer, he had changed all his displays. And
Wow.
so his displays were absolutely amazing. It was like a big timeline of history, and it went all up the walls, it went across the ceilings. It was amazing. But when I went into his room as well to have that conversation with him about, you know, what's happening, I became so sort of overwhelmed by everything. And then the teacher took down all those displays, and then the behaviour escalate as much. But you know, it's really important that, you know, schools do those sensory audits, anxiety audits, and you have that as evidence as well.
Yeah, which is
Um,
amazing. Talking about reports, if there are any families out there that are considering getting reports, what would be the primary report that you suggest that families get? Would it be an EP report? And if so, I've heard stories whereby those EP reports, or private EP reports, are not accepted by local authorities. Is that still the case?
I mean, private reports are from, as long as they're from qualified therapists, they should be
Mm,
accepted.
okay.
And I have heard that some local authorities don't accept those reports. But the other thing as well is that when you've got private reports, if you've got one from a local authority as well, it all depends on the dates of them as well and which one would be
Yeah.
agreed. And sometimes I'll talk about OT again. So
Mm,
if there is a private OT, and we don't encourage parents to be going out spending lots of money on receiving those private reports, but if there is an OT report that makes these suggestions, then that would be something that would be put into the plan for the local authority to fund as well.
okay. So families shouldn't be too worried about getting a private report that may not be accepted. You
No,
Because
no.
that's what I'm hearing a lot of, which is terrifying considering how expensive they are.
I mean, when a child or a young person's got an EHCP as well, parents and carers can request a reassessment. They can request an
Mm.
another EP assessment, or they can get referred to speech and language and OT through the NHS system as well.
Yeah, we know how long that takes. For sure.
Yeah.
True, true.
Every
Okay,
local
thanks,
authority is
Tanya.
different in regards to requesting those levels of support as well. Um,
Yeah, and that's part of the
and
challenge,
when
isn't it? That every local authority is so different.
it is, um, and the other thing I sort of mentioned about CAMS reports is that CAMS is sort of, if you see them as being a tier 2 or a tier 3 service, there are other services that provide mental health support as well, like the school nursing team that schools have access to. So sometimes it's quite helpful to get their input. And if you look on your local offer as well,
Mm,
every local authority has to have a local offer. There can be other support services that the schools can refer to, or that you can refer to, as like parents and carers can refer to as well, and it wouldn't cost additional funding. So
yeah,
always look on the local offer as well.
yeah, that's a really good tip.
So
So
it's also about looking at what are the needs of the child and the young person as well, and why that provision is not appropriate for school and college. So that's something that the parents and carers would have to look into as well.
yeah, yeah, and providing evidence for that. So what could a week look like for these young people?
So when you're doing your request for an EOTAS package, it's really, really important that you create a proposed timetable or like a provision plan.
Mm,
And in that as well, you can include who's going to be delivering it, how often they're going to be delivering it, um, if it's going to be online or if it's going to be home tuition or tuition in the community, and what level of training that they would have as well. Um, so, and what qualifications that you're going to be going for as well. So some,
on I was just going to say, on that point, how important is it to have the training specified on the EHCP?
um, I suppose if you're going to do something like an educational psychologist or an OT, making sure that they have that qualification and they are registered,
Mm,
that would be really important, especially if you've got one that you've already built a relationship up with and you want to continue using that provider.
hmm.
Things like equine therapy, animal therapy, making sure that they do have that qualification as well to be able to deliver that level of therapy.
Mm.
That's
And
quite important as well.
in the education field, of course, myself being a qualified teacher, there are tutors out there who are unqualified, and yes, they may be brilliant at developing that relationship with, which is obviously fundamental. But when our young people are able to access the actual education element, then those unqualified individuals can't do the actual teaching. Well, I say teaching, it's not going to be formal teaching. I don't believe in, sitting with worksheets and regurgitating, documents and things, but we do need to make sure that the individuals that are in place can provide the education element. And you and I have had conversations around local authorities really pushing the outcomes being more academic than, taking a young person to the dentist, which is sometimes what is requested as part of the packages.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, having a qualified teacher is really, really important as well, because then they have an understanding of that curriculum. So, for example, and what is best for that child and young person, and being able to make those reasonable adjustment and adapting the curriculum as well. So they'll have that level of expertise, which I think is really, really important.
Yeah, definitely. In addition to the level of understanding and the experience when it comes to knowing how to develop a relationship and that trust, because it is really about breaking through, unfortunately, that trauma that the young person has experienced. And I do feel that it's only with really highly experienced individuals that they know how to redevelop that trust with a young person. And that's key.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the other thing as well is making sure that they've got the right insurance. That's something that's important as well. Making sure that they've got the right insurance as well as qualifications.
Yeah, definitely.
So then the other things that we can sort of talk about as well, and that what parents and carers can apply for, is obviously therapy. So, speech and language, OT, physio, and I sort of mentioned about sort of animal therapy, and there's drama therapy, art therapy. So that can be requested as well, ensuring that they do have that qualification again. And what element of the plan that they're going to be supporting, I think, is really, really important. So always reflect it back to the EHCP.
Yeah.
So emotional regulation, for example, having animal therapy can be really, really helpful for meeting that outcome to support with their dysregulation, and how they're going to sort of how many weeks that they're going to be working for as well.
Definitely. And I love the fact that you've added that bit at the bottom, and we've talked a lot, you and I, over the weeks that we've known each other, or months now, about the importance of listening to the views of the child and the young person. And they will know what's going to work best for them. And it's so unfortunate that in some situations that's undermined.
Yeah, it is, and it's really, really important, like I say, that their voice is heard. If you don't feel that their voice is being heard, then always refer back to the Children's and Families Act. What a lot of parents and carers don't realise as well is that when you're requesting an EOTAS package, you can request for physical activity as well. So if they're in a school or a setting, they would be attending PE, for example. So that is also something that parents and carers can request as part of the EOTAS package, at least 1 hour a week.
And that's in addition to, well, regardless of whether it's mentioned on the EHCP?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Because that is something that they could be accessing. So, I've seen some EOTAS packages that have included gym memberships, trampolining, bikes, cycling, athletic groups. I mean, whatever your child and young person is interested in, or would be interested in, or wants to try. If you're going to apply for an EOTAS package, and the same thing in school. When I was at school, we used to change them all the time. So we would do it for like half a term, and then we do another half a term. So there could be swimming. So make sure that you put that down as part of your EOTAS package as well.
Yeah, I think there needs to be a distinction, doesn't there, between what you request and what might get accepted, because we work with lots of families who have requested quite extreme things, and unfortunately they haven't been accepted. So it's being mindful of that as well, to make sure it is hopefully accepted.
That's it, being realistic. But then, like I say,
Mm.
you know, quite a lot of local authorities will look at public expenditure as well,
Yeah,
and making sure that it meets the needs of the child and young person, but also, you know, requesting one-to-one swimming that's going to cost £89, or requesting, you know, a block of 12 that's going to cost £8-10. You know, it's about sort of looking at that as well.
yeah. So it does sound like parents and carers do need to put some time aside to look into this and to investigate it, because otherwise it may well get scrutinized anyways. I think it's a case of making sure that you can make the local authorities' lives easier, and that will hopefully ensure it'll get accepted more readily.
Absolutely. And that's why we've got the handout that we'll give to people as well, because that sort of outlines all the information that would be required.
Yeah,
And making sure that you put down costings and links into the people that you want to be delivering the tuition, or where you would like your child or young person to be accessing the therapies, or what type of PE sessions and things like that. The other thing
absolutely.
as well is that, you know, obviously social interactions is going to be really, really important for children and young people.
Hmm.
So that's something else that can be applied for as well. So social activities, and as we said, an EOTAS package doesn't have to be your regular, you know, 9 till 3. So yeah, because we want to reduce the fear of isolation. And that's what the EOTAS package is about. You know, if they were in school, they'd be having those social interactions. So yeah, you can apply for social activities, community-based learning, arts and crafts.
Yeah.
We've seen scouts, brownies, but also dance classes as well, which then you've got a mixture of both physical and social activities as well.
Mm,
So that is something else that can be requested.
brilliant.
Um, a
And
few other things. Go on.
I think it's just being mindful that it should be so bespoke, because every young person is obviously an individual, and we have an opportunity here to create an amazing life for this young person. Obviously, they have suffered the trauma from the school, and here is an opportunity now to redevelop their enjoyment of life, and that's truly what they deserve. I'm just going to show a video. This is Louise's son, who lives in Birmingham. I think she may well be on the call. It's just to let families know, just give a bit of hope as to how it can work. And we have lots of videos. I'm actually going to be speaking to lots of families the next couple of months, and doing some video testimonials of them. This is one that we're currently working on with Louise, and Dylan is the son. So it's not totally edited and finished, but I think it gives a really clear indication of how it could work. Making sure I do this correctly. It may again take some time to. Can you see that, Tanya?
Yeah.
It's in focus-ish?
Yeah.
Fabulous. It's a couple of minutes.
I'm not sure we can hear anything.
My name is
No?
Louise.
There we go. Got it.
Dylan's mum.
Okay.
So then
No, we've lost the sound again, Joanna.
Can you hear? No? Can you hear it, Tanya?
No,
Let me try the other way.
we know this was working earlier.
It was working earlier. I know. Maybe I will share it at the end. Let me try one more time, just in case. It's such a fantastic video. Can you hear?
No.
Can you see it?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, fine.
There is some sound trying to come through. If you try and have a look at that, do you want me to go to some of the questions that are in the chat, Joanna?
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay, so the sound is sort of coming through. It's just not quite connecting there.
Okay, I will pause it.
So I have an EOTAS for my daughter. She can only manage 1 to 3 hours a week and is about to be assigned a mentor, and she cannot yet engage with formal learning. If EOTAS is a package, then should I be insisting that other things be included for when she can engage in them? My LA says don't worry about that, and we can add things to her package when she's ready. Tribunals in a few weeks over contents, and LA is keen for me to agree all is resolved. Took since I appealed to get the mentor agreed. I mean, I would recommend that you create a package beforehand, and make sure that you present that at your tribunal with suggestions, because like I sort of said, not every child's journey is linear. So, you know, preempting what you'd like to be put in that plan. It might take a couple of weeks for them to start engaging. So I'll use equine therapy for an example, or tuition as an example. You know, it might take a little while for that relationship to build up. And so, you know, what might be sort of half an hour a day over a couple of weeks, it might end up being 2 hours a day. It could be over 5 days, but it's about the tutor building up on that relationship first. So I would suggest that you create a package first.
And I find it fascinating, actually. Obviously, I've spoken to hundreds of people or parents over the last few years, and a lot of parents approach me and say, you know, my child isn't engaging. I don't think they're going to be able to engage. But actually, it's so much about finding that right individual. And what we do as a company is we obviously develop an understanding of the young person, their hobbies and their interests. But as much as it's, you know, we look for specialist teachers and who are experienced in autism, ADHD, PDA, etc., we also look at the hobbies and interests of every single tutor. And so we connect them that way as well, but also personality trait. We, you know, a mentor is great, but we need to, there's no default position to ensure that that relationship will still be established, even if they are a mentor. I'm not sure how you become a qualified mentor, but it's so much about finding that personality. And when I speak to parents, I say to them, you know, let me know how the first session goes. If you don't feel in your gut that that is the right match, then come back to us. You know, I don't want you to have another session if you don't feel in your gut that that's the right person, because parents will know. Mothers especially will know, right? That intuition is there. So it's just being mindful of that.
Absolutely.
Nicola's talking about transport.
Transport.
Transport is an issue for so many of us on the EOTAS. Transport costs have been a huge barrier. So that's interesting because as a company, we don't charge transport on top. So maybe these are companies that break transport down. Ours
I
is all
mean,
included.
you can request transport as part of an EOTAS package to and from activities and things. So, for example, if you're going to have activities as part of your EOTAS package that you can request, going to the museum or going to an outdoor allotment, for example, you can request transport, because the thing is that sometimes when children and young people can't walk down the roads, for example, because they come really sensory, they might have a busy road near them, it's a safe option. If you are requesting transport, always refer back to their transport policy. Every local authority's transport policy is very different, though. And when
How do you get that? I'm just referring to a lot of questions about transport, exactly that point. So I'm really keen to understand. Yes, it's the policy. How do we get the policy? How can we use the policy? How can we use this as a really strong argument? Because there's a lot of questions around this.
It's about sort of requesting why you would need the transport. So if there's sensory issues, for example, or safety issues, reference the transport policy that they have. Quite a lot of times, local authorities will say, for example, if you've got an EHCP and you're going to a school setting, they'll be like, right, no, the child lives less than 3 miles away, therefore they're not entitled to transport. But that's not true. So if you are requesting transport, like I said, for example, going to activities and things like that, like the museums, then write down what the mileage would be. Normally it's 45p a mile. And like I say, outline why traveling there or walking there wouldn't be the most suitable and why they would need that transport as well.
So it's the evidence.
You can always ask for travel training as well. You're entitled to request a travel card. So it's about putting sort of like the mileage in there as well, and always referencing back to the EHCP as well.
It's tiring though, Tanya. It's tiring, all these requests, and all of this fight. It's tiring. Going on,
and that's why it's really important to outline everything in your EOTAS request as well.
Yeah, from the onset.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Making sure it's clear, specific, quantified, and has costings.
Yeah, I mean, Alex Peters has mentioned the private report was not accepted, refused. Nicola's been declined over sensory issues, so that's an assessment via the NHS been declined. Alex, again, I think this is basically said no at every opportunity from the very beginning, had to fight. It feels like our daughter's situation isn't even considered. We have now been granted an EHCP, hooray. However, due to the goal of her ultimately working towards getting back into mainstream, they've stated this section I, it's blank otherwise, they accept she cannot go back to school, which seems to mean they've accepted it, but not provided any support. Back to fighting again.
So with that one, they haven't got anything written in section I, so therefore the local authority is still responsible for providing that education. So they have to put that package together, because every child and young person is entitled to that full-time suitable education, and that's outlined in the Education Act.
Yeah.
And I would suggest stating that. You can make a complaint as well to the local authority that they're not providing an education, and follow their complaints process. And you would exhaust the complaints process, and then you can make a complaint to the Ombudsman as well. But you can also appeal the decision. But it's really difficult to do them alongside each other because they counteract each other out. And you can have a look at some of the outcomes of those decisions in the Ombudsman, the local Ombudsman website.
Okay. Nicola's mentioned many providers talk the talk, but don't necessarily walk the walk when it comes to complex needs children. I don't think the government's supporting that in any way, because the government can't even define what complex needs means from the schools white paper that came out last week. On a bit of a side note, but yeah, I mean, it would be good to know, Nicola, exactly what you're looking for in terms of the provider. Louise, I'm glad that you asked this. I was thinking about you. Gym membership as PE, can Louise request a gym membership?
Yeah,
as PA?
Of course, you can request a gym membership.
Brilliant. There you go. Will it be accepted? I mean, and we just don't know. This is the point, isn't it?
But then it's about referencing that if my child or young person was in an education setting, it's obviously been agreed, if you've already got an EOTAS package, it's been agreed that education is not going to be the most suitable. So therefore, you know, they would be getting PE in the setting. So therefore, they're required to get it in their part of their packages as well.
Yeah. And you mentioned,
I can see that someone sort of mentioned about ice skating as well, but it all depends on if it's one-to-one private lessons, or you know, a skating session, for example, that's going to be one session a week. It's very different, and like I say, it does reference like public expenditure again, like I sort of mentioned earlier. You know, £89 for a private one-to-one swimming lesson, or £12 at the local baths. It's very different.
Yeah, especially when it's somewhat similar. I mean, swimming is swimming-ish. You know, it's comparable, isn't it? As opposed to an individual working with an unqualified teacher, for example, versus a highly experienced specialist. That's a very different situation. You can't compare like for like there. Emma is saying social activities for her 7-year-old. I would always default to any environments where there's a lot of homeschooling groups, and obviously that's going to be on the increase. I live in Rugby, which obviously is not that far away from London, but it's certainly not London. And I know even in Rugby, there's a massive increase in the amount of home ed groups that there are. So that's possibly an idea. I don't know if anybody else has got any other options and ideas around that. Lisa,
you can, again, referencing the local offer, you can also find things on the local offer as well, list of activities and things that they can access.
Fab. What about an increase in costs if prices change when on the packages?
Again, it's normally reviewed annually, so at the annual review, and you would sign a contract. We haven't gone through all that yet in our presentation, but you would request it an annual review, you would sign a contract, and then it would be reviewed. It all depends on how you're receiving that level of funding, how the LA is providing that support as well. So is it through their own funds, when they then have to manage the price increases, and parents and carers don't have to worry about managing that package through a personal budget or direct payments. But if at any time that there is an increase, it would be through that annual review, or just contacting the finance team and letting them know as well.
Yeah, on that point then, Tanya, what I know obviously the difference between a personal budget and commissioned directly by the local authority. What would you suggest then, if somebody like Lisa is in this situation? Would it be more reasonable to have a personal budget so she's in control then, if the costs are increasing?
Everyone's different, aren't they, about how they want to manage their EOTAS package. You know, for me, I think having a local authority that's going to coordinate it all for me seems less stressful. But parents and carers can request that personal budget. So an amount of money identified to deliver all that provision. So that agreement in the contract that you would sign.
You've just gone muffled. I think I'll try to lip read something about contract. There will be a contract that you need to sign, I think.
Oh,
was said.
Yeah, so there would be a contract that you would have to sign. So when it's agreed, the finance team would then get you to sign a contract, and that would be for an amount of money to provide that provision as well.
Yeah, the families that we work with really do push the personal budget because really of the experience that they have, the experience that they've had with the local authorities and the school system, and they want to regain regain control over their child's life, which I fundamentally, understand. If it was me, I'd be going down the personal budget route. Yes, there is admin involved, but at least because myself as a mother, I know my son, I've got a little one, I believe that I know better than the local authorities or schools.
And normally with a personal budget, most local authorities will ask you to have an additional bank account. And I think that makes it really a lot easier to be managing,
Yeah,
because then the money is coming into one account and going out of the same account,
yeah.
because sometimes local authorities don't write that in their contract
Mm,
and the money can get lost. And so if you are requesting a personal budget, I would highly recommend that you do that. And
yeah,
also keeping all your receipts, because that is something
yeah.
that you would have to provide to the local authority as well. Provide those receipts so that they can then follow their internal processes in regards to the finances as well.
Yeah, definitely. Super.
So you can request a little bit of both as well, like direct payments and a personal budget. So direct payments and local authority to arrange it as well. So you can request both. That way, for example, if you've got an OT, you know that that's going to be paid on a regular basis, for example. So it might be a little bit easier to sort of manage that. But if you're managing other elements, tuition or social activities and things like that, it might be easier for then the personal budget to do that as well. But it's
Super.
normally reviewed at the annual review.
I'm just going to pause this so we can run through the last few slides, and then we can obviously go back to this. If I can manage to share screen again. So that obviously didn't work. Let's go to the next slide. So what should the EHCP look like if agreed?
So obviously we've got all the different sections. So section B obviously sets out the needs that meet that EOTAS package. The EOTAS package, the provision must be detailed and specified in section F. So the type hours, what's going to be delivered, the frequency, the level of expertise. So that should be in section F. Again, it should be linked to section B as well. So you should still see that golden thread, having the outcomes in there as well. And section I, you'll see, is left blank. Sometimes parents get a little bit shocked by that as well. But section I is left blank. But then the provision is outlined in section F. And section F is the legally binding section. So that's what the local authority must ensure is being delivered.
It's really important. And obviously within all of this, it's making sure it's really specific. And that's something that I think more and more parents are realizing is exactly that.
And that's outlined in the code of practice. I've seen some plans that have come through before and they've been quite sparse. It sort of says social skills group delivered by school staff. Well, what does that social skills group look like? How many people are in that group? How many hours? How many weeks? How is it going to be reviewed? It's really, really important that that is specified in the EHCP, and that would be in section F.
Yeah, otherwise it makes your life really difficult.
Yeah, but then, like I say, we'll share that template, and then people can see a template of what they would include in there, and then that should support the local authority at putting it in section F as well.
Yeah, it's the element of clarity, isn't it? Essentially, this is what I'm looking for. This is the reason why. Dear local authority, please sign it off. Okay, yes, it's really clear. Sure.
Yeah.
You know, it's really being
Yeah.
mindful of that. Brilliant. And I like that you've added that bit about the free school meal at the end as well.
Yeah, free school meals. I mean, not many people who have EOTAS packages realise that if they're eligible, that they're entitled to request that. I wouldn't suggest requesting it at the time at the annual review for the EOTAS package, but it's something that you can discuss afterwards, because that's what people are entitled to.
Brilliant. In terms of how it's paid, I know we talked a little bit about personal budget, but could you just run through quickly, and mindful of the time as well, just run through what the difference is in terms of personal budget and the direct payment?
So like I say, the personal budget is something, an amount of money that the local authority identify to deliver that package. And the direct payment is where the money is paid directly to the parents for them to arrange. So I've sort of outlined there as well, where a request for direct payments are made, a local authority must consider that request as well. So you, at the time of the EOTAS package, when the local authority agrees, then you can have that conversation about how you would like the payments to happen. So yeah, a direct payment. And again, the payments will be made normally 3 times a year. It's paid in advance, but they do require receipts and bank statements as proof. And they can claw back that money as well if they see that it's not all been spent on what was previously agreed in the contract.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is well, I'm hoping this is going to be really helpful. I think I can make the screen bigger as well. There we go. If you wouldn't mind to go through what you kindly created and how families could use this.
So yeah, this is just a little bit of a template that we use. So having it broken down into different elements, so cognition and learning, social emotional mental health, therapeutic, and giving a little explanation about why and what you require, and referencing the EHC plan as well. So you've got the area, so the area of need, notes, why you would require that, the provider, so you know, sensational tutors, for example, they're entitled to that education, so that would be under the notes section. The estimated cost per week, the estimated cost per year as well, and then therapy, social activities, resources, PE, and transport. And then at the bottom as well, I've created a little table as well so that you can summarize all of those costings as well. It just makes it a little bit easier for those that are at panel. And I know some people sort of think that panel is a myth, but no, it is real. So that panel members can see the amount that's being requested.
And clearly, yeah.
And they don't have to come back and ask questions.
Definitely. Ourselves as a provider, we do send costings or a quote to the families that reach out to us, and it's essentially just copying and pasting the information into this form so it's clear. And I would presume other providers would do the same.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got those quotes as well, attach that to your EOTAS request as well.
Yeah, super. We talked a little bit about the review process and how important it is for the packages to be monitored so that they are not removed or questioned. Would you be able to review and go through this slide a little bit?
Yeah, so when an EOTAS agreed, it is still the local authority's responsibility to oversee it. So the local authority will be responsible for monitoring the suitability of the education. So making sure that it's reviewed every 6 to 8 weeks. And we also have, the local authorities also have that responsibility for safeguarding as well. So normally we'll have a review every 6 to 8 weeks, but you still have your annual review every 12 months as well.
Can I ask a question about annual reviews, which is definitely not on the slide?
Yes,
We're currently supporting a family who annual review has been pushed forwards. It's therefore, at the 9 or 10 month mark instead of obviously the 12. And the parent is incredibly fearful in terms of the EOTAS package being removed. And that's why they pulled this annual review nearer to the date. Where does that family stand? Where does that parent stand?
The local authority would have to sort of mention why they're choosing to bring that plan forward, the annual review forward. I mean, it's a bit of a case by case basis, without knowing all the full details. If the child or young person is approaching, have they met all their targets? Are the needs still there? I mean, there's lots of questions around that one as to why the local authority will pull that forward.
So it's asking those questions, I guess, of the local authority.
But
what
it's providing that information as to why the EOTAS would still be suitable.
Yeah, sure. And it comes again back to the monitoring and the outcome side of things, providing that evidence again. So
Yeah, absolutely.
What happens if it's not agreed? These families that have fought and fought and fought for an EOTAS package, it's not been agreed.
So yeah, if they decide that a full-time education at school is the most appropriate, then a school will be named in Section I. But you would have your letter with your final plan, so you can go to resolution. So you can go to mediation, tribunal, or judicial review.
Yeah.
So local authorities, again, they differ up and down the country. You can request mediation, and sometimes I do hear from doing some of these conversations that not all local authorities participate in mediations. And I find it really, really helpful being a local authority representative and listening to the parents. As long as you've got someone in the mediation that has that decision-making power as well, because sometimes we don't always have that. So mediation would be the first step really in the appeal process. And then you can appeal to the tribunal as well.
Yeah, super. Looking at some of the questions, because we just touched on the budget side of things. So Lisa has said that she's got a personal budget due to having a PDA and needing 100% flexibility, which I think is absolutely brilliant. You can make your own, you can make your own choices when it comes to the provision. Laura is asking, maybe this has been answered now. How do you get direct payments and what is it? So direct payments being from the local authority. I mean, maybe just recapping on what the two distinctions are, the personal budget versus direct payments.
So the direct payment is the amount of money that's paid to the parents for them to arrange. I think I might have said personal budgets twice earlier. So that would be for you to arrange. So you would have full responsibility of ensuring that it is delivered.
Yeah. And as I say, from our families, that is the thing that they are pushing, and that's what they're wanting, to have that control. Tribunal appeals.
Yes. So tribunals, it's the first tier tribunal. It's called SENDIST. So you can go to tribunal for refusal to carry out needs assessments, decision to issue, disagreements with the contents, disagreements with not to amend or amend the plan, disagreements with decision to cease. And I think depending on the age of that child that you sort of mentioned, that could be the reason why the local authority are bringing it forward a little bit, to make sure that it's in line with like the phase transfers. You can appeal Section I, and you can also appeal sort of around the health and social care sections. So if you're requesting an EOTAS, you would be appealing Section B, F and I. When you get your letter, you've got 2 months from the date of the letter to submit your appeal. You do have to contact mediation, and again, every local authority is different with the mediation providers. It could be kids, it could be global. There's lots of different providers out there. So you would need to contact them to either get your mediation certificate, or go to mediation. Like I say, you know, every local authority is different, and I'm sure that you'd find information on social media and things like that about how engaging your local authority is at mediation.
Yeah, super. A little bit on mediation as the next slide then, please.
Yep. So like I sort of said, you know, sometimes it's quite nice for you to have that conversation with the local authority, explain why you feel that, you know, you want changes made to the EHCP, for example. And like I said, it's not always necessary for you to go to mediation. You can request for that certificate directly. And when you get your mediation certificate as well, it can extend the appeal process by a month. So just say, for example, if you're waiting for additional evidence, like I mentioned, you've got 2 months from the date of the letter to submit your Sendis tribunal. But if you don't feel that you've got everything ready, or you know, you might be on holiday or anything else, you can contact the mediation service, and you could contact them at sort of like 6 weeks, for example, and then you would after you receive your certificate, you can extend it by an additional month. So then you'd have 3 months before submitting to the Sendis tribunal as well.
And judicial review, or JR, as many of our families mention.
Yeah, so it's about enforcing your rights. So a failure to deliver the provision in the EHC plan, like I sort of mentioned earlier, you know, you can follow the complaints process, but you can also go through judicial review as well. It depends on, what direction you want to go through, really. So such as a failure to deliver provision, a child is out of school not receiving that education, a failure to make a decision within the legal timescales. So an annual review is 12 weeks from the date of the meeting. An assessment is 20 weeks from the date of submission, and refusal to make provision by the way of a direct payment or a personal budget. So that can go to judicial review as well.
Right, fabulous. And then a couple more slides. Last one is obviously what we provide as the specialist tutoring support, and a couple of case studies, which I'll go through at the end. Other than that, where else can families go to for support?
So every local authority has got a SENDIAS, and SENDIAS is an impartial, it's free, it's confidential. It's normally in a local authority, but it does sit at arm's length from a local authority. SENDIAS don't only work with children and young people with EHCPs, but they also work with children and young people who have SEND. So sometimes their caseloads are extreme. So you can find that on the local offer, and you can make contact with them, and they will have their own website as well. IPSI is a charity, and IPSI are the ones that train SENDIAS as well and train local authorities. They do have their own website, and it's got amazing information on as well. I would really recommend having a look and scooting your way around that. There's also child law advice, which I find really helpful. Special needs jungle, that was set up by some mums, but they also have legal advice there as well. I mentioned case law earlier, so you can find that on the IPSI website. You can also find it on the Sendis Tribunal outcomes. And there's also something called the Noddy Guide, which is created annually. It came out about 2 weeks ago by Matrix Chambers, which is a legal firm. And it has so much information in about the legalities of EHCPs. And again, that references a lot of case law as well. On social media, you'll see a lot of people that give their recommendations. And, you know, I'm a parent, I've been through it, listen to Always make sure that you ask what their qualifications are as well, like we sort of mentioned earlier with tuition companies and things like that, you know, making sure that they've got those qualifications and what their experience is and how they can work with the families.
Yeah, definitely. And actually on that point, I recently had a meeting with Geldar's law firm to collaborate with them, and they have offered us a number of hours of free legal support for some of our families. So if you're looking for that, then do contact me, and then I will send you their way. So that's an amazing relationship we've established with them, with Doug and Adam. Just wanted to leave on one point, which is to go through a couple of case studies at the end, which I hadn't shared, and hopefully these will work. Just again, as a couple of examples. This is Sandy, who was only 4, autistic, pre-verbal, and did have profound learning difficulties. And this very, very different than the other case studies that I shared. Obviously, it's so much about the sensory side of things. She was just establishing language, and this is her timetable. Again, it's just to really give a clear indication of how bespoke the EOTAS packages should be. So when you're creating the timetable, it's really thinking about what your child deserves and obviously what they can engage in. Being mindful of, again, as we've discussed, having the right person in place is going to be so meaningful and so important for her. And then this one as well, which is Aaron, who's 16, multiple diagnoses, and we work with so many young people who do have so many diagnoses, mainly trauma, I would say, because of the school-based trauma and the system. And he was able to access functional skills. So you can see the variety of special support that is put in place. And what we do is to understand the child and create that package for every single young person, and that'll be different for everybody. Any further questions? Let me stop share. Any questions? Thank you for adding that, Tanya. Oh, I did. Lisa, thank you for mentioning that about the JR, the judicial review. That did make me laugh. Sometimes just mentioning JR makes local authority take action, and I think that, you know, that ends this on quite a really, well, on a positive-ish place. You know, it is about making your voice heard, about knowing your rights, and about having the confidence to approach the local authorities and asking for what you believe is the right situation and the right outcome for your child.
Absolutely.
So, any further questions from anybody? If not, we will go. Feel free to reach out to us independently. Tanya, I work closely with, so obviously I can share any contact details with Tanya. Thank you, Emma. I wish everybody a lovely evening.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.